Okay, good morning everyone. I've rearranged my slides about 10 times since I got up this morning, so I'm not sure now if that's the first one or the last one, but I'll click through them and we'll see. I won't dwell too much on an introduction to myself. I've had an introduction. That's a picture of me. We look kind of alike. I've got the same glasses on, so you know that's me. There I am. I've won a couple of innovations awards, so that sort of adds to my credibility a bit from the British Council for various things that I've done. And if you want to find out more about me, there are links along the bottom of this presentation to my social media and the things that I share. At the end of this presentation, I'll give you a QR code and you can download the whole presentation and access it as it is. So don't worry too much about taking notes and things like that, okay? You will be able to get the whole thing. Okay, I'll make a start. I'll start with a sentence from Silvia Carasciati. As contemporary communication is increasingly multimodal, the concept of communicative competence in ELT needs to be rethought. It's quite a bold statement. Maybe it's one that you disagree with or don't agree with. It actually comes from a paper that kind of supports and some of the ideas from multimodality and some of the ideas behind this talk. It was something that I worked on with Kieran Donaghy and Sylvia. Kieran did most of the heavy lifting, which is probably why in the picture here he's a bit less pink than I am. I'm the one at the bottom, and for some reason I've gone very pink. Maybe I'm pink now as well, I don't know. But you can download that later if you want to read up on some of the background behind multimodality and multimodal literacy. Before we get any deeper into this, I'd like to find out for you, what does multimodality mean to you? What does it mean to you? I mean, is it a new concept, an old concept, or something that you're familiar with? I'm going to put up a QR code and encourage you to get out your mobile phones, scan it, and there's a little questionnaire there. Just type in your response. If multimodality means nothing to you, by all means put that. All submissions are anonymous, so you won't be singled out as somebody who doesn't know. But if you can scan that and enter something, that will be good. Oh, okay. I'm kind of flattered that somebody actually wants to see my face, especially after the pink thing, you know, it's quite good. Okay, let's check some results. I'll just see if anything's coming through. Refresh that. Okay, 50 responses so far. What does multimodality mean to you? Plural, interconnectedness, multitasking, challenge, modes, channels of communication. Nothing, diversity. Diversity, lots of diversity, yeah. And that's interesting. It's a very diverse set of answers as well. You probably can't see them as well as I can. Okay. That's good. So, multimodality is something that's associated with modern text. Modern text is becoming more multimodal. And newspapers, you know, there used to be things that we read, it was text only, had some pictures on, although there's an element of multimodality in that too. So it isn't actually such a new thing, but it's something that's developing quite a lot, because a lot of the media that we experience now doesn't just come through reading or listening. Often it comes through reading and listening and viewing, and there are elements of design, and so it comes from multiple channels of meaning. Here's a definition of multimodal literacy, and supposedly it means multimodal literacy means the ability to comprehend and respond to multimodal texts and to compose multimodal texts. I think this is quite important because for a lot of people, multimodality just means using multimedia in their teaching. And it isn't just about using text and audio or using video, but there's also an element of composition and helping students to produce multimodal text in order to be multimodal literate. It's a difficult word to say, isn't it? Multimodal literacy. I keep tripping over that one. So let's have a look at what the modes of communication are. So there are generally thought to be 5 different modes of communication. As language teachers, we're probably pretty familiar with the linguistic one. We teach words, we teach vocabulary, we teach syntax all the time. We teach genre. Maybe we're less familiar with the visual one. Maybe we focus less on the images that go with text and the relationship between the images and the text. And that's an element of multimodality. Meaning is transferred not only through words, but through texts and what we see visually, the images that go with it. There's also an element of gesture involved in communication. As you can see, I use my hands quite a lot. Some people do more than others. But, how often do we focus on these kind of gestures within our classes? How often do we focus on the issues involved with eye contact and whether we make eye contact with the person we speak to? There's also this issue of spatial communication. How close we are to other people when we speak. This varies from culture to culture. I can remember, as being British, I have quite a wide kind of, my proximity to people is quite distant. I tend to stand quite a long way away from people because I'm British, I don't get too close. And when I first started teaching, I started teaching in Cairo, where Egyptian people get very close, and I found myself constantly stepping back when people were speaking to me, and it was really difficult to get over that. And then when I went back to the UK, I found people constantly stepping away from me when I started speaking to them. It's nice that I adapted anyway. But this issue of spatial relationships doesn't just go to proximity with people. It can also affect the arrangement of things on a page. So if you look at a website where the different things are arranged on a page, it's an element of spatial communication. And of course, there's the oral side. As language teachers, we teach listening. We teach listening skills. But multimodality goes beyond just listening for comprehension. It also involves, what about the background music? What impact does the background music have on something that you're listening to? If your students are watching a film or a video clip, how does the music change the relationship? What about the sound effects? What about the tone of someone's voice, whether they sound friendly or aggressive, or how they use their voice or the tone of their voice to persuade? How often do we focus on these things? These are all quite difficult and important things to focus on. So multimodality really is about building our students' understanding of all of these things together, but also of helping them to use these things. It's not just about comprehension. They should be able to use these things too. I've got a multimodal text here, and we'll have a look at it and see sort of what aspects of multimodality are going on here. It's a video, you know that. Before I even start to play it, there are some interesting things about it. The colour red, for example. Why is the colour red being used? How would it be different if it was blue or green? What are different cultures' associations with that colour? What about the font? Why is it using this font? How would it be different if it was using Comic Sans, for example? You know, there was a spate of people loving Comic Sans, which is this kind of comical font. How would it impact on that? How would it change it? We've got a logo there as well, which probably a lot of you recognise, the TED logo. So already, before we start playing the video clip, there are lots of aspects of multimodality going on there. I'm going to play this clip, and maybe you can watch it and think about some of those aspects of those 5 modes and what's going on inside this video clip, and then we'll look at it again in more detail. It's just about 2 minutes.
So in college, I had to write a lot of papers. Now, when a normal student writes a paper, they might spread the work out a little like this. And I would want to do that, but then actually the paper would come along, and then I would kind of do this. Now, I had a hypothesis that the brains of procrastinators were actually different than the brains of other people. And to test this, I found an MRI lab that actually let me scan both my brain and the brain of a proven non-procrastinator, and so I could compare them. So here's the brain of a non-procrastinator. Now, here's my brain. There is a difference. Both brains have a rational decision maker in them, but the procrastinator's brain also has an instant gratification monkey. Now, what does this mean for the procrastinator? Well, it means everything's fine until this happens. So the rational decision maker will make the rational decision to do something productive, but the monkey doesn't like that plan. So he actually takes the wheel and he says, actually, let's read the entire Wikipedia page of the Nancy Kerrigan-Tanya Harding scandal, because I just remembered that happened. The instant gratification monkey does not seem like a guy you want behind the wheel. He lives entirely in the present moment. He has no memory of the past, no knowledge of the future, and he only cares about 2 things, easy and fun. Now, sometimes it makes sense to be doing things that are easy and fun, but other times it makes much more sense to be doing things that are harder and less pleasant for the sake of the big picture, and that's when we have a conflict. Turns out that the procrastinator has a guardian angel, someone called the panic monster. Now, the panic monster is dormant most of the time, but he suddenly wakes up anytime a deadline gets too close or there's danger of public embarrassment, a career disaster, or some other scary consequence. But there's a second kind of procrastination that happens in situations when there is no deadline. So if you want to have a career where you want to be a self-starter, something in the arts, something entrepreneurial, there's no deadlines on those things at first.
Can you hear me again now? Great. Okay. Okay, so let's have a look at that and think about those 5 things and different elements of those 5 things without the audio on. You know, I don't know if you can see, but he's gesturing a lot. He's using lots of gestures. You know, he's got a diagram there. Is it a scientific diagram? No. Is he a scientist? How do you know? How do you know he's not a scientist? How do you know that's not a scientific diagram? You know, what's the credibility behind what he's saying? Is what he's saying true? You know, probably most of us recognize a lot of those things as being true. But, you know, he's wearing a t-shirt, jeans. How would he look if he was a scientist? You know, what would these diagrams look like if he was really a scientist? You know. Those are some of the things that we can sort of focus on with our students. Think about, you know, how is he using his voice? How does if you'd listened to this without the audio, you know, the fact that people are laughing in the background, how does that impact on your understanding of the meaning? You know, so lots of things sort of going on there. There's an interesting thing about, if we look at, come on. I'm trying to find the right spot in my... There it is. It's interesting the stage that they're using It's a similar stage to this one, but there's a circle at the front, and there are seats going all the way around the sides. You know, why has that happened? Why do you think that's happened? You know? What about our images? Why has he used, you know, he's got his image of the panic monster. You know, it's a very childlike image, isn't it? Why? Why is he doing that? Getting students to think about all these different things and how they impact on communication is part of what multimodal literacy is about. You know, thinking about these things, what impact they have, how they impact on the overall meaning, and the way that they influence the meaning is part of multimodal literacy. So as you see, it's quite a complex area. I actually started trying to break this down because I've been asked to write a multimodal literacy syllabus for all the kind of things that impact on multimodal literacy. I'm going to share it with you, what I've got so far. I've actually broken it down into 8 different literacies. The first 5 are quite predictable. They're the ones from our different modes. So linguistic literacy, spatial literacy, visual literacy, oral literacy, and gestural literacy. But I've actually put in, when I started to think about it, there are some others in there. There's elements of design literacy, you know, how you design things. There's a little definition in the back there, which you won't be able to read yet. And there's critical literacy, actually thinking deeper about how meaning is being influenced. And of course, digital literacy, because to construct these things, our students need to be digitally literate. This isn't my syllabus. This was just the first phase of thinking. So I thought, okay, those are the literacies that we need. Then I started to break them down. So when you get this, if you click on it, you'll see the other side. There's a little icon at the top there. If you click on that, I started to break those down into skills. So here's our definition of spatial literacy. And these are some of the skills that are involved. So proximity and human interaction. Reading spatial arrangements. Don't worry about trying to note all these down now. I'll give you a link to the whole thing. You know, how space affects meaning and accessibility. So these things are all quite complex, these individual skills. My favourite one, and for me the most important one, is the critical literacy one. And that's about looking at the deeper underlying meaning. So there's a definition here. And some of the, for me again, one of the most important things we can teach our students, identifying purpose, audience, and bias. You know, I think especially in the present day. So there are a whole bunch of sub-skills for each of these literacies. And you can check these out later. I've done it for all of them. What I've also done, you're probably beginning to feel that now recognise my innate inability to not under-prepare. I over-prepare everything and do far too much. So what I've also done is for each of these, you'll see a little button at the end there. And at the end there, if you click on that button when you get it, you'll find 4 or 5 suggestions for how to teach that. So check this out later and you can try out some of the activities with your students. So each one has a few suggestions for how to teach that. Okay, so when you get it, you can explore the different literacies by just clicking on this one, oral literacy, click on the little icon at the top. It will take you to a bigger definition of the literacy. There it is. And here you can check out all the different skills that are involved in becoming literate in that way. So recognising the emotional tone through sound, and each one has suggestions for how to build on that. Okay. And then when you've finished exploring that literacy, you can click on the home button and go back to the beginning. So that's going to be your homework, okay, to explore all of that. Okay, if you want a link to it, you can scan the QR code here and that will give you the link. I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that. If not, then wait till the end of the presentation and you can get it then. So my first idea when I was planning this presentation was to kind of go through all those and get some suggestions and all that kind of thing, but then I thought I'd need to be here for 3 or 4 days to get through all that. So at that point I thought I'll just give it to you and you can take it home and you can spend 3 or 4 days going through it and thinking about it. But I think it's a work in progress as well, so I might be changing it within the next few days or something, as I tend to. But I hope that that's useful for something to take away in terms of, thinking about multimodal literacies, the sub-literacies within it, and digging down into the skills that our students need and how we can teach those. That's my practical takeaway. I thought, as we're still here and I've still got 40 minutes, I'd actually go through some activities as well and suggest some things. So here are some kind of multimodal learning activities that you can try with your students. The first one is creating a meme. And creating memes is a nice thing to do with our students because it gets them to explore the relationship between text and image. Memes are great for that, and we can use them at quite a low level. Does anybody recognise this or know what the first 2 words underneath it are likely to be? Keep calm, yeah. It's become really widely recognised. Well, it's a meme, it has to be, doesn't it? Does anybody know the origin of it? Second World War. This is the origins of it, supposedly, originates propaganda poster, British propaganda posters, hence the crown, from the Second World War, and supposedly it wasn't actually used. It was never used. But this little activity here, just this page, with our image and our definition is an interesting one as well. Because do you think the text that I just showed you, do you think it's true? Is it true? I mean, somebody over there said something about the Second World War, but is it true? How would you know? Is the fact that I'm standing up here, if I stand up here now and say, yes, it's true, does that make it true? And what would you need to do to find out? Again, this could be an interesting activity that we could do with our students because, just because teacher says it's true doesn't make it true. Just because somebody says something is true doesn't make it so. So even before you get into creating a meme, you've got that interesting thing about bias and credibility behind it. Do you want to know if it's true? Yes. Then go and check and find out. Don't believe me. I asked ChatGPT, it could be lying to me, I don't know. Who knows, really. Anyway, so keep calm. Here's my meme, keep calm, teach multimodality. You could actually get your students to create their own meme. It could be something motivational to do with learning English. If you want to create these kind of memes for your students, there's a link here to a meme creator where you can just sort of type in your text and it will add the text to it and then you can download it. So when you get the presentation, if you want to try that with your students and get them to create their own keep calm memes, then by all means do. There's another link here to another website which has all sorts of different... get started for free. Yes. Which has all sorts of different images and meme type things on. It's being a bit annoying at the moment. I don't really want the tutorial, but there you go. Yeah. There, see what you make of that. So there are different kinds of text, mixtures between text and images and memes that you can create here, and it's AI assisted if you want AI to help you. There's loads of different templates, but that's a nice thing you can do with your students to get them thinking about relationship between text and image, you know, and what is that and how does it affect meaning. But that's something that you can do with quite low-level students. It could be, you know, motivational texts about life, could be motivational texts about learning English, could be something connected with grammar. But those are some useful tools. Another thing that I think is quite relevant these days is sort of recognizing fake images. Is that a real teacher? What do you think? How do you know? Don't all teachers have 3 arms? You know, there's the invisible extra one that's, you know, manipulating the lesson plan while they're teaching. Yeah, AI has produced this whole realm of fake imagery that, you know, we need to get our students used to. And I think, you know, these are some examples. You can try this with your students. Which of these do you think are real? Think that one's a real image or a fake image? How many people for real? It's a real one. If you believe me. Fake or real? That one's a fake one, yeah. How do you know? Is it something that you can see, or is it background knowledge, or, you know, how would your students know? Would your students know? Fake or real? Yeah, that one's real. Fake or real? See, it's getting more difficult now, isn't it? It's the kind of thing I think he would do, isn't it? But it's fake. I mean, that is why we love him, isn't it? You know, he would do that. How about this one? How do you know? Yes, it is fake, actually. The 2 oldest children, one of them should be a girl. So it's background knowledge. But it's, you know, it's only because I have the background knowledge that I can tell. It's very difficult to tell, isn't it? Last one, fake or real? No, background knowledge doesn't really help you there, does it? Diverse family. The giveaway is actually with the fingers. When you look at the fingers and the hands here, there are actually far more fingers than there are hands. AI still struggles with fingers. So that's something you could try with your students. And there are some tips for how to know, how to detect it here. You can check these out later, how to detect fake texts. But it's getting increasingly more difficult, you know, increasingly more difficult to detect. Another nice activity you can do is stepping inside images, and this is different in a way. This is something, I mean, I've got a nice image here. So in this activity, the student has to imagine they are that person. So imagine you are the Mona Lisa. So if you want to, you can close your eyes and imagine you're the Mona Lisa, you're sitting there, you're being painted. And then, you know, try to get the person to step inside the image and think about what's their worldview, what's going on with this person, you know, what's your view of the world as that person? What are the things that you believe in, you know, and what are the things that you care about? Often we sort of look at images and art as other, you know, but we can also encourage our students to empathise with people, you know, and that could be a person. It doesn't have to be a work of art, as I said. It could be an image of a person from their course book. and just get them to step inside that person's shoes and think about what it is like to be that person, or what it might be like to be that person. And and that's a great way, I think, of building visual literacy and thinking about people from that perspective. But also, it's a great way to build empathy as well. And I think, despite what Elon Musk says, I think empathy is still our human superpower, and is still something that we need to build within our students and nurture within our students. If you're looking to make kind of find images for them to step into, there's some famous artworks here if you follow this link. I'll agree and close. So if you want to find some artworks, there are some examples here. But it doesn't have to be works of art. As I said, it could be, it could just be an image from your course book, or any image with a person on. Get students to try and step into it and be that person for a little while. People from other cultures work very well, as well. So stepping inside an image is a nice activity to get students to do. The other thing that I like to do that I think is a great activity is to get students to watch video with the sound off and just see what they can interpret from just observing and build their visual learning skills. I think it's very powerful, and there are lots of things that you can do with that, and we'll focus on, if you come along to my workshop after this, I'll be looking just at silent viewing. But these are some of the things that you can do. You can get them to think about what the people's are feeling or thinking. You can try and get them to predict the script, what they would say, or think about cultural observations or genre. I've got a little video for you to watch, and maybe you can sort of think about what the people are thinking and feeling as you go through, as you watch the video. Two minutes left. Oh, I would thought that was 26. Yeah. Sorry, I'm getting confused about the timing. Okay, if we can dim the lights quickly for this one. Yeah, what's he thinking and feeling? Okay, so although you didn't hear the dialogue, you didn't hear the script, you can take loads of information from that. You know everything that's going on. You can probably predict the whole or a lot of what they said from that, and sort of great language activity for students writing and scripting it. There are cultural things there, kind of cultural observations. You know, is that the way things would happen in your culture? You know, lots of things like that. First day or second day? It's probably first day, isn't it? I mean, he had the picture. No, lots and lots of information that students can take from that. You know. And just from silent viewing. So, you know, if ever you're doing a video with your students and you have a video activity to do with your students, before you get them to listen to it, before you get them to sort of do their comprehension activities, play it silently and see how much information. Do it yourself first and see how much information you can take from it, and sort of focus them on the silent viewing part first. It also reduces that kind of cognitive overload of having to cope with what they're seeing and what they're hearing all at the same time. You know, they can scaffold the whole thing through by just watching it silently, which is nice. So try some silent viewing for building up their multimodal literacy skills. If you like these kind of, I mean, I love these kind of animated video clips. I think they're fantastic, and so I store them. So I've got a store of them on Pinterest. So when you get the presentation, if you click through the link here, it will take you to all my short clips that I've saved. I think there's about 170 of them, which should keep you 173. So that should keep you going for a while, you know. And they're ones that I've looked at and thought are very good for sort of teaching. So have a look at that when you get the presentation. But I'll give, in my workshop afterwards, I'll be going through some other ideas to do with those. You know, I think going back to the critical literacy and thinking critically about what communication messages are, what's embedded in the communication, and getting our students to think about those things more. You know, there's an activity here called 5 Key Questions, and you can use this with any kind of authentic text to get students thinking about it. You know, who do you think created it? You know, often our students don't think about those things. They have a text, they focus on understanding it. But it's important to think about who created it. You know, the difference between it being created by, you know, Fox News, GB News, or, you know, CNN or the BBC. You know, there's a big difference that in there. Why was it created? You know, nobody just creates text for no reason. There's a purpose behind it. You know, who's it intended for? Is it intended for you, or is it intended for someone else? You know, what creative techniques do they use to get your attention, and what values and lifestyle points are there? Maybe we can. I'll show you another clip, and you can have a think about some of those things in relation to this. Okay.
Hostess walks up to me and she said, "Mr. Sheeran, is this your first time dining with us?" And I say, "Yep." The waiter comes over, he's telling me about the specials. Super fancy vegetables, fancy sauces. I said, "Sounds fancy." So fast forward and the food comes. The waiter goes on to tell me, "We are proud to present this farm to table blah blah blah, posh and fancy blah blah blah, with a side of blah blah blah." You know, the food looked good. I just thought there was something missing. So I reach into my bag and I take out the only thing that can complete me. And at that point, the whole world came to a stop. And the waiter was screaming through his eyes. So that's my idea. Do you want to do it?
Okay, so that's quite an interesting one. It's kind of obvious in some ways why it was created. Who it's aimed at is maybe not so obvious. Is it directed at you? Are you a tomato ketchup eater? You know, are you a fan of Ed Sheeran? I mean, I don't particularly like him, so for me it has no appeal, you know, the fact that Ed Sheeran's there. Also, interesting to look at some of the techniques used. They didn't really use a script and people talking to each other. It was his narration the whole time. how does that affect the meaning as opposed to a script where people are talking to each other? He's going blah, blah, blah. You know, the use of camera angles when it focuses in on the dog's face and the shock and horror, you know. But for some people, you know, going to a restaurant like that and putting tomato ketchup on could be something quite normal. But, you know, there are lots of interesting things going on there, and I think it's nice to focus our students on those kind of things. There are also some follow-up questions here about, you know, so getting them to think about the clues, you know, clues as to who created it. I mean, we had a logo there and we had the Heinz bottle, so we know it was Heinz, we know it was an advertisement. But you could use these questions with almost any video clip, advertisement, a news clip, or anything like that, and get students to think about, you know, who's behind it, who's creating it. And it doesn't necessarily even have to be a video, it could be a text as well. You know, newspaper article particularly, you know, who's created it, who's thinking it, how are they influencing you. This is an activity that's intended to help students with their construction and making videos themselves. And it's done by first looking at a video and deconstructing it and looking at the different shots. You know, when somebody's creating a video, they will storyboard it first, and they will have sort of different blocks showing what each shot will do. And so what I've done is I've put together a list of, you know, this is a glossary of film shots. Well, actually, I didn't put this together. I got ChatGPT to do it. You know, ChatGPT is my secretary. You know, just put something together to do it for me. So this is kind of different film shots that you can use when you're producing a video. So you could give this to students first to build up their vocabulary so they understand what the purpose of film shots are. You can give them a storyboard, which is basically something like this, and then just show them a video and get them to kind of fill it in. I've got a video here for you which shows the use of these kind of storyboarding techniques. Again, I'll do it without the sound. Oh. So there's a nice first shot, you know, establishing shot, you know. What's that communicating? Yeah, okay, so we're setting up who that person is. We've had a shot before that. He's walking into the laundrette to show where we are. And now we've got the over-the-shoulder shot. Shows him and shows there's a woman in the background. Showing something about his personality. What's she thinking, huh? It's like, oh my God. Okay, so, you know, getting students to break that down into shots and it shows how they're used and can help them understand how they can use those shots, those kind of shots and angles when they start building their own or constructing their own materials. So that's a way of deconstructing text, video text at least. Another nice activity that we can do with our students to build their ability to do with multimodal literacy is creating digital narrative. And this kind of links on from that kind of the camera angles and different shots in a way. You know, we can get them to build their own digital narrative, which is like a kind of form of digital storytelling or digital journalism. And this works really well if it's combined with project-based learning, because it can take a long time, so it's better to do it as a project, split it up over different classes. There's a very good model here for project-based learning, which comes from the gold standard, and these are the kind of elements that project-based learning should include. How many of you, sorry, I'll leave that up big if you want to, but you can get it later. How many of you are familiar with project-based learning and do it with your students quite often? Okay, quite a few. And have you used this kind of structure, this background? Yeah. And it takes a long time to plan? It can take a long time to plan. There's a link there for it. And what I've done here with my presentation is I've actually given you a prompt so you can get something like ChatGPT to, if you're new to this, you can get ChatGPT to plan a project for you. On this side, I've put an AI prompt template. So you can edit this, copy and paste it, edit in the different parts that you want. So you can add a topic here, and there are some rules. Give a description of your students, the number of hours you want to use, the number of weeks. So if you fill in all this part on the left-hand side and fill in the template, then put it into ChatGPT and it will generate a project-based lesson plan for you for creating digital narrative. I've got an example one here. Here's my example. So it's a project on multimodal literacy. If I copy that, let's hope that's copied. And then, if I go to ChatGPT, this is one I haven't prepared earlier, and I put my prompt in, hopefully you'll see that it will generate the whole of my project for me. So gold standard elements, yeah. Give that some time. So if you're new to project-based learning and digital narrative, you want to try out something new, edit the template, give it a try and see if it will come up with a good project for you. And the whole thing should be here. So it's giving you some background, reflection, critiquing and revision. It takes a little time, what the public product is. And it should also give you some suggestions for how you assess it afterwards. And there's your project timeline, key language support, assessment rubric outline. So if you just take that little prompt, edit it, describe your students and put it into ChatGPT, it will produce a project plan for you and you can have a multimedia literacy plan all ready for you. Okay, and that's on the free, that will work on the free version of ChatGPT as well. Don't have to have a paid for version. And project-based learning is a great way to develop multimodal literacies because it involves so many of those different things. Digital literacy skills, team working skills, understanding and producing different types of media. Okay? I have a wonderful activity here that I'm not going to show you because I'm running out of time and because it's also in my workshop later. So if you want this one, you have to come back for the workshop. There you go. If that isn't blackmail, what is? But it's such a good activity, it's so good. Okay, just to get back to the sort of theoretical side, you know, why what? I still can't say it. Why? Okay, why multimodality? You know, and I think there are some great reasons why we should be pushing this. You know, learners are accessing multimodal text all the time, you know, through the internet and through social media, through various different things, even through paper-based media, it's still multimodal. You know, there are still relationships between design, text, images, colours, all of those things. You know, they're being influenced by these texts all the time. And not always in a good way. So we need to help develop their understanding of how they're being influenced, the types of techniques that are being used on them to make them think different things. Think about who's trying to influence them and why. I think these are important things to push our students to understand. You know, they need to understand how to use those elements themselves, to develop deeper critical thinking and deeper understanding of things. And I think also, in terms of production, these are some really useful life skills as well. developing these as life skills, digital literacies and understanding and the soft skills that go with them, I think are very important for their future. So those are some of the reasons why. There are lots of challenges for us as teachers in doing this. The language level needed to discuss some of these things is very complex, isn't it? When it comes to talking about how these things are influencing us or being used to influence us. Those sort of elements of different shots and things like that, that's quite a difficult thing to talk about in another language. But I think it's worth dealing with even if you have to deal with it in the first language, and that's where your advantage comes in as being non-native speakers who can speak your students' first language. It's very useful to be able to speak about these things. There's also a level of maturity involved. We have to decide, at what level are our students ready to understand some of these things. Personally, I feel the sooner the better, but There's also, language focus. We're used to teaching languages. When I started looking at my when I started looking at my multimodality literacy syllabus, that was, thinking about actually trying to add on the extra element of language focus onto that and how to structure it was mind-boggling, So structuring a syllabus that balances those things and the linguistic things that we're used to teaching is very complex. And it's a wide breadth of skills. So all of those things are very challenging. And of course, there's our knowledge as teachers. We haven't been taught a lot of this stuff ourselves. So how do we get that knowledge? Where do we find it? ChatGPT. No, but that's a place to start. But And ChatGPT is very helpful. AI is very helpful in that ways, in terms of building our knowledge. But we do have to build that knowledge if we want to pass it on. But, be willing to learn alongside your students. They might have some knowledge of these things themselves, particularly those digital literacy skills. And a few tips to help you. I think that the simplest place to start is to look for them. I'm going to say it again, multimodal texts within your course book. Because your course books are examples of multimodality in themselves, and they do have text that you can exploit in that way. So look at the images and think about how we can overlay different activities on those images. Build on our existing lesson materials and develop abilities to respond through the creation, multimodal creation. So instead of maybe giving written homework, we can get students to produce a video or a podcast or an audio for homework so that we start developing some of those skills. Project work, great. And finding authentic materials, video clips. The internet is full of an authentic material in itself. Have a look at the authentic materials and then kind of think about how you overlay and exploit these skills and develop these skills from within them. If you look into the little activities within here, you can just pick one each week and think, okay, I'll do one of these activities to develop this particular skill this week. Just try the odd thing here and there. So that should help you to do that. That's your homework, if you like. Okay, that's it for this. Well, that's it. That's as much as I've got to say. These are links to some of my books, which if you want to check out when you get the presentation, you can. Links to social media. And if you want the presentation, the QR code is here. It's there. Thank you for listening. Happy to answer any questions if anybody's got any questions for the last 5 minutes. But grab that first. Thank you. Any questions? Okay, thanks very much. Feel free to go to your next session.